The first sound you hear in the morning is supposed to be birdsong, or maybe the coffee maker gurgling the life. It's not supposed to be the tortured scream of wood and metal. But for the third time in a month, that's the sound that ripped me from my sleep. A sharp, violent crack that echoed across the pasture, followed by the arrogant roar of an engine fading into the distance. I didn't even have to look. I knew it was her, Karen. And I knew that the gate my father and I built with our own hands was now just a pile of splinters lying in the gravel. For her, my property line wasn't a boundary. It was an inconvenience, a shortcut that shaved 3 minutes off her trip to the yoga studio. She saw my land, my home, as nothing more than a patch of dirt to be driven over. What she didn't see was the man she was pushing.
And she had no idea that the same hands that built that gate could also build a cage. Before we get to that, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button because you're not going to want to miss how this ends. After 20 years as an Army combat engineer, you learn a few things. You learn that some structures are meant to keep people out, and some are meant to hold them in. You also learn that the quietest places are often the most heavily defended. When I retired, all I wanted was quiet. I'd had enough of noise, of shouted orders, of the chaos of a world that always seemed to be tearing itself apart. My wife, Sarah, had always dreamed of a place like this, a small ranch nestled against the hills, far from the suffocating neatness of suburbia.
After she passed, buying this place felt like keeping a promise to her. It was 100 acres apiece, bordered on one side by state forest and on the other by the manicured lawns of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA. My deed was ironclad. My property was mine, a sovereign nation of one, entirely outside their jurisdiction. The only connection was a gravel access road that cut across a corner of my land to meet the main county road. The gate was more than just a gate. It was a symbol. A heavy, beautiful thing made of cedar and wrought iron, swinging between 2 stone pillars. It said, "This is where my world begins and yours ends." It was my line in the sand.
I hadn't even gotten the last of the boxes unpacked when she made her first appearance. A gleaming white luxury SUV, the kind that's never seen a speck of mud, rolled to a stop. The window slid down to reveal a perfectly sculpted blonde bob, sunglasses the size of dinner plates, and a smile that was all teeth. "Just so you know," she announced, her voice dripping with condescension, "we use this road. It's a community access point." I walked over, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Morning, I'm John. Actually, this is a private drive. The county road is just a half-mile that way." She laughed, a short, sharp sound like breaking glass. "Don't be difficult. People have been using this shortcut for years."
Before I could respond, she put the car in gear and nudged the closed but unlocked gate with her bumper, forcing it open with a groan of stressed hinges. And she was gone, leaving a cloud of dust and entitlement hanging in the air. I stood there, stunned. It wasn't just the trespass, it was the absolute lack of respect. I spent the evening resetting the post and tightening the hinges, telling myself she was just a rude newcomer, an anomaly. A week later, the anomaly returned. This time, I'd locked the gate. I heard the engine, and then the sickening crunch as she rammed it without even slowing down. The crossbeam splintered, the lock shattered. I ran out onto the porch, shouting, but she just gave a dismissive flick of her wrist out the window and sped off. My blood began to boil. This wasn't an accident. This was a statement. She was telling me my lock, my gate, my property rights meant nothing. I repaired it again, this time with steel brackets and a heavy-duty chain. It felt like I was fortifying a position, not just mending a fence. That weekend, I was in the local feed store when an old farmer named George clapped me on the shoulder.
"Heard you met Karen," he said, his eyes twinkling with a mixture of pity and amusement. "She's the HOA President over at Oak Ridge. Thinks her title makes her queen of the whole county." Another man chimed in, "She'll fine you for the color of your sky if you let her."
Tried to tell me my barn was an unapproved agricultural structure. My family's been farming this land since before that HOA was even a bad idea. Their stories painted a picture of a petty tyrant who used bylaws and regulations as a bludgeon to get her way. They warned me to be careful. She doesn't just break rules, George said, his voice low. She rewrites them.
Obstruction! She was calling my gate an obstruction on my own land. I nearly laughed, but the anger was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. This woman wasn't just a bully, she was malicious. She was using a fraudulent document to try and intimidate me into submission. This wasn't about a shortcut anymore. She had declared war. She was trying to invade my sanctuary, the one place on earth I had carved out for peace, the place I had built to honor my wife's memory. Karen had crossed a line she didn't even know existed. She thought she was dealing with some simple old rancher. She had no idea she was poking a man who spent 20 years designing fortifications, and I was about to design my masterpiece. My first move wasn't steel and concrete. It was paper and ink. I drove down to the county clerk's office, a dusty building that smelled of old documents and quiet bureaucracy. I spent the entire morning going over deeds, property surveys, and zoning maps, tracing the history of my 100 acres back 50 years. The clerk, a kind woman named Mary with spectacles perched on her nose, helped me pull the original plat maps. And there it was, in faded blue ink, clear as day. The gravel road wasn't an easement. It wasn't a shared right-of-way. It was, and always had been, part of the private property I now owned. Karen's community access point was a complete fabrication, a fiction she had maintained through sheer force of will. Armed with certified copies of the documents, I felt a surge of confidence. The law was on my side. I sent a registered letter to the HOA addressed directly to Karen, including copies of the deeds and a polite but firm notice to cease and desist all trespassing.
I figured that was it. Faced with irrefutable legal proof, she'd have to back down. That's what a rational person would do. But I was quickly learning that Karen wasn't rational. She was territorial. Her response came 2 days later, not in a letter, but in person. Her white SUV barreled down the road and screeched to a halt in front of my repaired gate. This time, she wasn't alone. A man in a golf shirt and pleated slacks got out of the passenger side, a clipboard clutched in his hand like a weapon. He was the HOA's head of compliance, a man whose entire purpose was to measure the height of other people's grass. "Mr. Thompson," he began, without any introduction, "we've received your letter. However, the HOA board has voted to reject your claim. Historical use establishes this as a community road." I walked toward them, my old cattle dog, Buster, growling low in his chest beside me. "Historical use doesn't trump a legal deed," I said, my voice calm and even. "Your board doesn't have a vote on my land." Karen stepped forward, sunglasses pushed on top of her head. "You're being selfish and unneighborly. You're intentionally disrupting the flow of this community."
"This isn't your community," I shot back, "and my gate isn't disrupting anything. Your habit of ramming through it is." The man on the clipboard scribbled furiously. "We're documenting your hostile attitude and non-compliance. The fines will continue to accumulate." Then Karen delivered the final blow. "And we've spoken to the sheriff's department," she said, her smile sharp and predatory. "They understand the situation. They agree it's a civil matter, but they've been made aware of your aggression." It was a threat, plain and simple. She was poisoning the well, painting me as the aggressor, the unstable veteran with a chip on his shoulder. That was the moment I knew reason had failed. The law was a tool, but a tool is only as good as the person wielding it, and she was better at twisting it than I was at following it. She didn't care about deeds or facts. She cared only about winning. As they drove away, kicking up another cloud of defiant dust,
I felt a cold calm settle over me. For 20 years, my job was to analyze threats and neutralize them. I assessed terrain, calculated stress points, and built structures to withstand incredible force. Karen thought this was a battle of HOA bylaws and angry letters. I was about to turn it into a problem of engineering. That night, I didn't sleep.
I sat at my old oak desk, the one Sarah always said was too big for the room, with a bottle of bourbon and a set of drafting pencils. I sketched designs on graph paper, running calculations in my head. A simple barrier wasn't enough. She'd just bring a bigger truck. I needed something that wouldn't just stop her, but would use her own aggression against her. Something that would hold her. A trap. The plan that formed was elegant in its simplicity. It had two parts. Part one was the gate itself. I would rebuild it, but this time, the cedar planks would be a facade, a rustic skin hiding a skeleton of reinforced steel. The posts wouldn't be wood. They'd be 6-inch steel I-beams, sunk 10 feet into the ground and encased in a ton of high-strength concrete. The gate would be mounted on industrial-grade hinges that could support the weight of a truck. And the locking mechanism would be an internal, magnetically activated steel bolt, 2 inches thick. From the road, it would look almost identical to the old gate. It would look breakable. It would be an invitation. Part two was the consequence. Just behind the gate, hidden under a fresh layer of gravel, I would install a G-force-triggered containment system. It wasn't a weapon. It was a mechanism. 4 heavy steel bollards, spring-loaded and held down by an electromagnetic catch. The catch would be wired to an accelerometer mounted inside the gate's steel frame. The moment the gate experienced a sudden, high-impact force, like a 2-ton SUV hitting it at 30 miles per hour, the circuit would break, the magnets would release, and the 4 bollards would shoot up from the ground, creating an unbreakable steel box around the front half of the vehicle. The car wouldn't be damaged, but it would be caught, trapped, helpless. It was a beautiful design, non-violent, but absolute. It didn't destroy. It simply contained. For the next week, my ranch became a fabrication yard. I had the steel delivered from a supplier in the city, telling them it was for a new barn foundation. I rented a post-hole auger and a portable cement mixer. I worked from dawn until long after the sun went down, the glare of my welding torch a lone star in the darkness. Buster sat watch, a silent, furry sentinel. I felt a familiar focus settle over me, the same focus I'd had on countless missions. Every measurement had to be precise. Every weld had to be perfect. This wasn't just about stopping a bully anymore. It was about pride. It was about building something right, something that would last, something that would hold the line. As I put the finishing touches on the trap, a profound sense of calm washed over me. I covered the trenches with a seamless layer of gravel, raking it smooth until it was indistinguishable from the rest of the drive. I installed 2 small, weatherproof security cameras, nesting them discreetly in the foliage of the old oak trees that flanked the entrance, their lenses aimed directly at the gate. They would be my silent, impartial witnesses. Then, I waited. It was a different kind of waiting than I was used to. It wasn't the tense, adrenaline-fueled waiting for an enemy attack. It was a patient, almost peaceful certainty. I had built the perfect defense, and I knew, with the instinct of a hunter, that she would come. I'd baited the trap with the one thing she couldn't resist, the appearance of weakness. The gate looked just as vulnerable as it ever had. It happened on a Saturday afternoon. I was on the porch, cleaning my old service rifle, a task that always helped to clear my head. Buster lifted his head from his paws, his ears perked, and let out a low growl. A moment later, I heard it, the familiar, aggressive hum of her SUV, and she wasn't alone. Behind her was the compliance officer's sedan and another car I recognized as belonging to another board member. It was a procession,
A royal parade of petty tyrants coming to make their final stand. They weren't just coming to drive through. They were coming to gloat. Karen didn't slow down. If anything, she accelerated, a plume of dust billowing behind her. She probably imagined the satisfying crack of splintering wood, the feeling of once again imposing her will on my world. I watched, my hands steady, my heart beating a slow, rhythmic drum. I saw the grim satisfaction on her face in the split second before impact.
Then came the sound. It wasn't the crack of wood. It was a deafening, resonant thud, like a giant steel door slamming shut. Metal on metal. The SUV, a 2-ton symbol of her arrogance, stopped dead. It didn't just stop, it was caught, its momentum instantly absorbed by the 10 tons of concrete and steel I had buried in the earth. The front bumper crumpled like tinfoil, the hood buckled, and the airbags exploded in a violent white cloud. A split second later, a deep, mechanical thump, 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 thump echoed from the ground as the 4 steel bollards shot up, boxing in the front of the vehicle with brutalist efficiency. The convoy behind her screeched to a halt, the compliance officer's sedan rear-ending the third car with a pathetic crunch. The silence that followed was more profound than the noise it replaced. It was the sound of absolute defeat.
For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, the SUV's door was flung open, and Karen stumbled out, coughing from the airbag residue, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her perfect hair was a mess. Her oversized sunglasses were askew. She stared at the unyielding gate, then at the steel ballers surrounding her car, and then at me, sitting calmly on the porch. What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice cracking with a mixture of fury and fear. I slowly stood up and walked down the steps. Buster trotted at my heel, tail held high. "I stopped you," I said, my voice carrying easily in the still air. "You were warned, Karen. This is private property." The other HOA members were clambering out of their cars now, staring at the scene with wide, disbelieving eyes. The compliance officer pointed a trembling finger at me. "This is a booby trap. It's illegal. You could have killed her." "No," I corrected him, stopping a few feet from the trapped SUV. "A booby trap is concealed and designed to cause harm. This is a non-lethal, high-strength security barrier. It didn't harm her. It just stopped her from breaking the law. Again. And it's all on camera." I pointed to the oak trees. Their faces went pale. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later, drawn by a frantic 911 call from Karen. He surveyed the scene, his expression grim. Karen launched into a hysterical tirade, accusing me of attempted murder. I simply handed the deputy my phone, which was already live streaming the footage from the cameras, along with the certified copies of my deed. He watched the video of her accelerating toward the gate, then looked at the deed, then back at Karen. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat and devoid of sympathy, "according to this, you were trespassing on private property and deliberately destroying a gate. From where I'm standing, Mr. Thompson was within his rights to fortify his property." The story was the talk of the county within hours. The footage from my cameras, obtained by a local news station through a public records request, went viral. Karen's reign was over. The HOA was hit with a massive lawsuit, my countersuit, for harassment, conspiracy, and fraud. They settled out of court, their insurance company paying for the multiple gates she destroyed and a hefty sum for damages. Karen herself was charged with reckless endangerment and vandalism. She lost her position as president, sold her house, and moved away, vanishing from the community she once terrorized. My gate now stands, untouched. The trap beneath the gravel remains, a silent guardian. It's more than just a barrier now. It's a monument to a simple truth. A person's peace is worth defending. My home, the sanctuary I built for the memory of my wife, is finally quiet. And in that quiet, I found the one thing I'd been fighting for all along, the freedom to just be. Life will always have its Karens, people who will try to push, to bully, and to break you. You have to decide where your line is. You have to build your gate, and you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to make sure it holds.